What if the maid who walked into a lonely rancher's life carried letters written to his dead son? A candle flickers in the dark. Jace Callahan lifts a fallen envelope, his name trembling on the page. Flames roar at midnight, horses scream in terror, and a young woman throws herself into the fire to save Storm, the colt he swore never to lose. Whispers spread in town, betrayal, lies, debts buried in the past. A stranger waits in the shadows, and Jace must choose, trust the woman everyone condemns, or let his heart die with his family's ashes. And yet, under the cottonwood tree where sorrow once reigned, vows are renewed. A widower takes a bride, a promise is kept, and a wild horse runs free, proving that even from ashes, love can rise again. If this story touched your heart, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear your voice. And if you'd like more stories of hope and second chances, please consider subscribing. Your presence here means the world. The Wyoming sky at dusk stretched wide as an ocean, its fading light spilling over the endless plains. The Callahan Ranch lay quiet beneath it, a sprawl of weathered fences and barns standing against the chill wind. Once, laughter had echoed here, children's shouts, a woman's gentle singing drifting out the windows. Now, only the creak of wood and the restless snort of horses filled the emptiness. Jace Callahan sat on the porch in a broad wooden chair, a man who seemed carved from the very land he ruled. At 50, he was still tall and powerfully built, but the years had etched deep lines into his sun-worn face. His hair, once dark, had surrendered to silver at the temples, and his eyes, storm-gray, sharp once, carried the weight of grief that had dulled them. He had buried both wife and son 10 years ago, victims of a fever that swept through like a thief in the night. Since then, the ranch had become his prison, its silence heavier than any chain. That silence shifted with the rattle of wagon wheels. A mule-drawn cart creaked to a stop, and a young woman stepped down, holding a carpet bag tight against her chest. Elena Monroe. She looked barely 22, small and slender in her plain gray dress, the hem dusted from travel. A kerchief tried to tame her chestnut hair, though strands had escaped to catch the last light of day. Her hazel eyes were watchful, cautious, avoiding his as she approached the porch. Everything about her seemed restrained, as though she carried a secret too heavy for her frame. "Evening, sir," she said softly, her voice nearly carried away by the wind. Jace gave her a brief nod, neither welcoming nor cold. "Quarters are off the kitchen. You'll find what you need. Tomorrow, you'll see the rest of the place." She dipped her head, murmured thanks, and disappeared inside with her bag hugged close. Days passed in quiet routine. Elena worked with diligence, sweeping, cooking, tending fires, but never seeking conversation. She kept her distance, yet Jace began to notice the moments when her silence cracked. One evening, returning from the stables, he found her standing in the hall, her rag limp in hand. Her gaze was fixed on the mantel, where portraits of his family still rested. Mary's painted face smiled serenely, and beside it, a photograph of Daniel, his boy with the mischievous grin. Elena's eyes brimmed with tears. She quickly wiped away when she realized Jace was there. She mumbled something about dust and slipped away. Another afternoon, she lingered near a framed sketch of Storm, the young colt Daniel once adored. Jace caught the faint movement of her lips, whispering as though speaking to someone not there, before she startled at his presence and turned away. These glimpses unsettled him. They reminded him too much of wounds he had tried to bury. Then came the morning when frost glazed the yard silver. Jace returned from tending cattle to find Elena in his room, smoothing afresh, linens with careful hands. She worked quickly, almost too quickly, as though hurrying to finish before he arrived. Her carpet bag rested on a chair. When she shifted the blanket, the bag toppled open. An envelope slipped free and landed at his boots. Jace bent to pick it up, his fingers closing around brittle paper. The name written across it made his chest seize. Daniel Callahan. His son's name, bold and alive on a page when the boy himself had been in the ground for a decade. Elena froze, color draining from her face. "That's nothing, sir," she whispered, reaching with trembling hands. But Jace straightened, towering over her, the letter clutched tight. His storm-gray eyes locked on hers, sharper than they had been in years. "Why do you have this?" Elena's lips parted, but no words came. Her breath shook, her eyes darting like a cornered animal. "Please," she managed, voice breaking. "Don't read it." The fire in the hearth crackled, throwing shadows against the walls. Jace's hand tightened on the envelope, knuckles white. He could hear the hammer of his own heartbeat, a rhythm louder than the wind outside. "Don't read it?" His voice was low, dangerous, carrying both grief and fury. "My boy's name? In your keeping? You will tell me what this is." Elena stepped back, her shoulders pressed to the dresser. Her eyes shone with something between fear and sorrow. She shook her head, as though words might betray more than silence ever could. From the stables came the sharp, restless whinny of Storm, echoing like a warning. Jace held the letter high, the flame's light catching the script, his jaw clenched. For the first time in years, the ranch did not feel empty. It felt as though a storm was breaking inside his walls, carried in the hands of this quiet girl. And he knew, whatever truth this letter carried, it would not leave him unchanged. Jace stands in his room, firelight throwing shadows across his face, the envelope addressed to Daniel Callahan gripped in his fist. Elena pleads, her voice shaking, but he refuses to release it. The silence between them stretches taut as wire, and with it, the certainty that this letter holds a secret capable of shattering everything. The firelight in Jace Callahan's room burned low, throwing restless shadows across the wooden walls. The envelope in his hand felt heavier than iron, Daniel's name etched on its surface like a wound reopened. Elena Monroe stood frozen before him, pressed against the dresser, her chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. "Talk," Jace said, his voice rough as gravel, "or I'll open it myself." Elena's lips trembled. For a moment she looked as though she might collapse. Then she shook her head, slowly, as though the truth itself weighed too much to speak. "It wasn't meant for you," she whispered. Jace's hand tore the envelope open. The paper inside crackled with age. He read in silence, his gray eyes scanning each line. Elena had written to Daniel as if the boy were alive, telling him of her journey west, of debts her family had carried, of gratitude owed. She had written of Mary Callahan, his late wife, as though she were still guiding her. Jace's throat closed. Each word was both knife and balm, forcing him to confront memories he had long kept locked away. When he finally looked up, Elena's eyes were wet, shining in the dim light. "You weren't supposed to see those," she said. "Why?" His voice thundered now, sharper than before. "Why write to a dead boy?" Elena clasped her hands tightly, as if holding herself together. "Because he listened. Because he was part of the promise." Jace's jaw tightened. "What promise?" Her gaze flickered toward the mantel where Mary's portrait hung. "Your wife," she whispered. "Mary helped us when no one else would." "My father?" He was drowning in debt. "We were weeks away from losing everything. She gave us a chance to survive, and I swore to her, before she died, that I would never forget, that I would repay what she gave." The words hung in the air, fragile but piercing. For the first time since she had arrived, Elena lifted her chin and met Jace's eyes directly. Her voice steadied. "I came here not just for work. I came because I owed Mary a debt. She asked me to watch over you if the time ever came." Jace staggered back a step, as though struck. The floorboards creaked beneath his boots. He turned from her, his breath harsh in his chest, staring at the fire as if it could burn away what he had just heard. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the shutters like a voice refusing silence. Days after, whispers began to stir in town. Word traveled fast in Wyoming, carried by merchants, by women at the well, by men leaning on fence rails. Elena Monroe was not who she seemed, they said. A girl from Ohio, spinning tales about the late Mary Callahan, just to win favor with a wealthy rancher. Some claimed she aimed to secure her place as mistress of the house. Others sneered that she was weaving lies to cover a past she couldn't escape. Jace heard the whispers when he went into town for supplies. The stares followed him, sharp and accusing. He answered none of them, but the silence in his jaw was enough for tongues to wag louder. Back at the ranch, Elena carried herself with quiet dignity. The though Jace could see the toll in the way her hands shook when she thought no one was watching. She scrubbed harder, worked longer, as though labor might drown out the rumors. One evening, as twilight pressed against the windows, Jace returned from the stables to find her sitting alone at the kitchen table. Her fingers were tight around a worn piece of cloth, her face pale with exhaustion. She looked up at him, and for the first time, her voice broke. "They hate me," she said simply. "They think I made it all up." Jace stood in the doorway, his silhouette dark against the fading light. He wanted to speak, to defend or condemn, but his tongue felt heavy. He was not sure himself what to believe. It was the following night when the knock came, a heavy, deliberate rap against the ranch door. Jace opened it to find a man standing in the chill. The stranger looked to be in his 40s, broad-shouldered, dressed not like a rancher, but like a man used to counting coins. His coat was black wool, too fine for the dirt roads, his boots polished though dulled by the dust of travel. His hair, slick and dark, receded at the temples, and his sharp features seemed carved to cut rather than smile. His eyes, a cold slate blue, carried the gleam of someone who knew far too much. "Callahan," the man said, his tone even, practiced. "Name's Victor Harlan. I believe you've taken in a young woman, Elena Monroe." Jace's gaze hardened. "What's it to you?" Harlan smiled, but it held no warmth. "Let's say I have an interest. Her family owes more than gratitude, and gratitude doesn't pay debts." Behind Jace, Elena appeared in the hall, her face drained of blood at the sight of him. Harlan's eyes flicked to her, the smile curling wider. "Ah, so the bird is here, hiding behind ranch walls." Just as I expected, Elena clutched the doorway, her knuckles white. Jace's voice rumbled low. "You'll say what you came for." Harlan tipped his hat with mock courtesy. "Only this, debts have a way of following. And secrets. Well, they rarely stay buried. You may think you know why she's here, Callahan, but I promise you, you don't." He turned and walked back into the night, his boots crunching over the gravel, leaving silence heavy in his wake. Elena's breath came ragged, her face stricken as though every word had struck her like a lash. Jace closed the door, the echo of the man's threat ringing louder than the wind outside. He turned to Elena, but she had already slipped away down the corridor, her shoulders hunched, her figure trembling like a shadow that might vanish at any moment. For the first time, Jace wondered if bringing her into his home had not reopened wounds, but invited something darker still. Jace stands alone in the hall. "Victor," Harlan's words echoing in his ears. "You may think you know why she's here, Callahan, but I promise you, you don't." The door rattles in the wind, the house suddenly colder, the truth heavier than any storm. The night came restless. Clouds rolled low across the Wyoming sky, pressing heavy shadows against the earth. The ranch lay quiet at first, only the distant whicker of horses, the sigh of wind through cottonwoods. Jace Callahan, pacing the hall, could not shake the echo of Victor Harlan's words. "You may think you know why she's here, Callahan, but I promise you, you don't." The words clung to him like smoke. He had left Elena silent in her room, the door closed between them, but the doubt remained. He could not decide if she was victim or accomplice. It was near midnight when the first smell of smoke reached him, acrid, sharp, curling beneath the doorframe. Jace's head snapped up. Then came the sound, hooves stamping, frantic neighs rising from the barn. He grabbed his coat and rifle, flung open the door, and was hit by a wall of heat. The main stable was aflame, fire climbing fast along the dry timber. Sparks shot into the night sky, painting the dark with violent orange. Horses screamed inside, their bodies thrashing against locked stalls. "Elena!" Jace shouted, his voice carried into the storm of fire. From the other side of the yard, she appeared, barefoot, nightdress fluttering, hair loosed from its kerchief. Her eyes wide, she ran straight into the chaos. "Get back!" Jace barked, but she ignored him. The flames roared louder, devouring beams. A stall door cracked under the hooves of a terrified gelding. Jace threw his weight into another latch, shoving the horse free into the yard. Smoke burned his throat. Then he heard it. A piercing, desperate cry, unlike the others. Storm. The colt reared in his stall, eyes rolling white, coat slick with sweat. Jace fought toward him, but the flames had cut the path. Heat licked his face, blinding. "Elena!" he roared. She was already there, crouched low, covering her mouth with her sleeve. Her voice rose above the din, soft but certain. "Storm!" The colt's ears flicked. He stilled, and then, against the chaos, he pressed forward, trembling but responding to her call. Elena reached for the rope halter, her fingers steady despite the flames around her. Jace forced his way through, knocking aside burning planks. He caught Storm's bridle as Elena led the colt out. Together they dragged the young horse into the open air. The barn groaned, its roof sagging. With a thunderous crash, the center beam gave way, sparks exploding into the night. Jace pulled Elena and Storm clear just as the structure collapsed in a fury of fire and ash. They stumbled into the yard, coughing, clothes blackened. Storm shook violently, but stayed close to Elena, his sides heaving. Jace bent over, hands on his knees, chest burning. He looked up at her, face streaked with soot, eyes alive with something fierce. For a moment, the doubts that haunted him faltered, but as he turned, a glint caught his eye. Amid the wreckage, where the fire had not yet consumed everything, lay a small tin, box half buried under fallen boards. Paper fluttered from its bent lid. Jace moved before thinking, dragging the box out with a boot. He pried it open, ignoring the sear of heat. Inside, among charred edges, was another letter, folded carefully, its ink intact. He held it up to the firelight. The handwriting was unmistakable. Elena's. Her face went pale. Why was this hidden here? Jace's voice was sharp, cutting through the crackle of fire. Elena's mouth opened, then closed. Her hands trembled at her sides. "It's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is." His eyes narrowed, storm gray and relentless. "You said you came here for a promise. But this," he shook the letter, "this speaks of more than gratitude." She stepped back, shadows from the fire flickering across her face. "Please, not here," she whispered. "Not like this." But Jace's suspicion had deepened. In the glow of the burning barn, the truth seemed to slip further from reach. Behind them, the horses shifted nervously, their eyes reflecting the flames. Storm nudged Elena's shoulder, as if tethering her to the earth when her world threatened to unravel. The fire raged until dawn, leaving only charred beams and ash where the stable had stood. By morning, the town would hear of it, and whispers, already cruel, would swell into something sharper, talk of sabotage, of betrayal within Callahan's own walls. Jace stared at Elena across the smoke-filled yard, the half-burned letter still in his hand. For the first time, he wondered if she carried not just Mary's promise, but a secret dangerous enough to tear his world apart all over again. Jace grips the half-burned letter in the ruins of the barn, his eyes fixed on Elena. Storm presses close to her, choosing her over him. The flames die down, but suspicion roars higher, Jace now certain that Elena hides something greater than repaying a debt. Dawn bled pale light across the smoldering ruins of the Callahan barn. Smoke still rose in thin streams, curling against the Wyoming sky. The horses, shaken but alive, shifted restlessly in the corral. Jace Callahan stood among the ashes, the half-burned letter clenched in his fist, suspicion burning deeper than the embers at his feet. Behind him, Elena Monroe moved carefully, brushing soot from her arms. She had not slept. Her eyes, red-rimmed but determined, flicked toward him as though bracing for judgment. Jace turned, the lines of his face carved harder by the fire's glow. "I want the truth," he said. His voice was low, rough, all of it. No more half-answers, no more promises wrapped in secrets. What debt ties you here? And why does it keep hiding in letters buried in barns? Elena stood frozen. Then slowly she exhaled, as if surrendering to something inevitable. "My father," she began, her voice quiet but steady, "was a farmer in Ohio. We were drowning. He borrowed from men who owned land, men who wanted more. When he could not pay, they threatened to take everything. Our home, our dignity, even us." Her hands tightened in front of her, as if holding invisible chains. "It was your wife, Mary, who saved us. She learned of our plight through the church. She came to Ohio, met with the men herself. She paid off what she could, bargained for the rest. She gave us our freedom, and she asked me, a frightened girl of 12, to promise her something. Jace's jaw tightened. What? That if she could no longer protect you, I would. Elena's voice trembled but did not break. She said you carried the weight of too much pride, that grief might one day hollow you out. She asked me to stand by you if that day came. Jace turned away, his broad shoulders stiff. He had not heard Mary's voice in 10 years, and now it came back through Elena's lips, like a ghost refusing rest. Why keep it hidden? He asked. Because no one would believe me, Elena whispered. Not in this town. And because men like Victor Harlan would never let it rest. At the mention of the name, a shiver passed through the yard. It was near noon when Victor Harlan returned. The merchant rode up with a sleek bay horse, his black wool coat untouched by ash, his boots polished despite the dirt road. He dismounted with practiced ease, his cold slate eyes sweeping the ruins as if tallying costs. Well, Callahan, Harlan said smoothly, seems misfortune has found you. Shame about the barn. A man in your position can't afford such losses. Jace's storm-gray gaze darkened. Say what you came to say. Harlan's smile curved, sharp and mocking. I've come to collect. Her father's debts were never cleared, not truly. You may think your saintly wife bought freedom with coin and kindness, but men like me keep ledgers longer than that. He turned his eyes to Elena, who stood stiffly at Jace's side. And she knows it. Don't you, girl? You know the shadow that follows your name. You can't hide behind Callahan's walls forever. Elena's face drained of color, her hands twisted in the folds of her dress. You're lying, Jace growled. Harlan tilted his head, feigning innocence. Am I? Or is she lying to you? His gaze lingered on Elena, voice low and cutting. She plays the martyr well, doesn't she? But what if she's been bargaining with me all along, promising pieces of your land, your trust, your heart, in exchange for her freedom? Jace's breath caught, suspicion flaring again like sparks in dry grass. He looked to Elena, who shook her head violently, tears cutting paths through soot on her cheeks. Don't listen, she pleaded. I told you the truth. That man lives on chains and fear. He'll twist anything to make you doubt me. But the image burned in Jace's mind. Elena and Harlan, alone, voices low. He remembered the fire, the letter found where it should never have been. Doubt grew sharp, louder than her words. Later that evening, as the sun bled into a horizon of gold and crimson, Jace walked the yard alone. He heard them before he saw them, voices, hushed but distinct, carrying from the half-empty stable. He moved closer, each step weighted. Through the cracked door he saw Elena standing opposite Harlan. Her hands were clenched, her face pale, her voice low and urgent. You can't keep coming here, she said. You'll ruin everything. Harlan's laugh was soft, cruel. Everything's already ruined, unless you do as I say. Jace's stomach twisted. From where he stood, it looked like negotiation, like betrayal dressed as secrecy. He could not hear all the words, but he saw enough. Elena leaning close, Harlan smiling like a man who had already won. He stepped back into the shadows, his jaw locked, his hand fisting at his side. The image would not leave him, the woman his wife had trusted, speaking in whispers with the man who threatened his ranch. Storm's restless cry echoed from the corral, as if sensing the fracture widening between them. Jace turned from the stable, the night closing around him. For the first time since Elena arrived, he felt the weight of betrayal pressing heavier than grief. From the shadows, Jace watches Elena speak with Victor Harlan in the stable. Though her voice carries desperation, all he sees is secrecy and the glint of Harlan's smile. To him, it looks like a bargain struck in the dark. Suspicion hardens into certainty. Elena Monroe may not be the savior she claimed to be. The town of Dry Creek woke hungry for scandal. Word of the fire at the Callahan Ranch had spread before the embers cooled. By dawn, gossip slithered through every doorway. At the blacksmith's forge, in the mercantile, outside the church where women drew water and men rolled cigarettes in the cold morning air. They spoke of Elena Monroe. She's no maid, one woman whispered, her breath fogging in the frost. She's bait. Lured her way into Callahan's house with stories of his dead wife. Mark me, another said. The girl's been in league with that merchant Harlan. Why else would the barn go up in flames? By noon, it wasn't whispers anymore. It was certainty. Elena was a traitor. At the ranch, Jace Callahan worked in silence, his broad back turned as he rebuilt what the fire had stolen. Suspicion had carved deep into him after what he had seen the night before. Elena and Harlan, their voices low, shadows locked in secret. Elena tried to approach, her hands raw from labor, her eyes pleading. "Let me explain," she said. But Jace did not look up. "I've heard enough," he muttered. His voice was rough stone. Storm whinnied from the corral, restless. The colt paced the fence line, tossing his dark mane, watching Elena with a sharp, protective gaze. When Elena, heartbroken, packed a small bundle of clothes that evening, intent on leaving the ranch to spare him further disgrace, the colt went wild. Storm kicked against the stall, slamming his hooves into the gate until the hinges rattled. He reared, striking the air, neighing with fury as Elena stepped toward the path that led out. Jace rushed in, shouting, trying to calm the colt, but Storm's eyes were fixed only on Elena, wild, desperate, refusing to let her go. The noise carried across the valley. It was as if the earth itself knew she could not walk away. Elena froze. Her breath shook. She turned, tears spilling down her soot-stained face. "Even your horse knows I cannot leave," she whispered. Jace had no answer. He turned away, jaw locked, as Storm's cries rang through the ranch. That night, the sky split open. A blizzard swept down from the mountains, snow driving hard against the windows, wind howling like wolves across the plain. Jace rode out at dusk to check the far pasture, stubborn pride pushing him into the storm. He had heard rumors of wolves prowling near the herd, and he would not let another piece of his ranch be taken, not while he still drew breath. But pride was brittle against the force of nature. Snow blinded him, ice stung his skin, and the ground beneath his horse turned treacherous. A cry of pain split the night as the animal stumbled, pitching Jace hard into the frozen earth. He lay still, breath knocked from his lungs, the world whirling white around him. Pain lanced through his shoulder, his ribs. He tried to rise, but his body refused. The storm swallowed his voice when he shouted. He was alone, cold, seeping fast into his bones. For the first time in years, he felt death close, merciless, indifferent. Back at the ranch, Elena sensed it. Storm would not calm, rearing and slamming against the fence, nostrils flaring at the wind. He cried, shrill and piercing, each sound an alarm. Elena's heart lurched. She grabbed a lantern, wrapped herself in a thick coat, and without waiting for anyone's permission, she followed Storm into the blizzard. The colt tore through the snow, driven by something primal. Elena stumbled after him, lantern flickering, wind clawing her face. "Find him!" she begged through chattering teeth. "Please, find him." Hours seemed to stretch like years until Storm stopped, snorting, hooves pawing at the drift. There, half buried in snow, lay Jace, unconscious, his skin pale, his breath shallow. Elena dropped to her knees, brushing snow from his face, pressing trembling fingers to his neck. A pulse, weak, but there. She pulled at him, straining with all her strength to haul him upright, whispering words through sobs. "Don't you dare leave me. Don't you dare leave this ranch. Mary made me promise. I won't let you go." With Storm's help, they dragged him back through the blizzard, step by agonizing step, until the ranch lights glowed dim in the distance. Inside, the storm raged against the windows. Jace lay fevered on his bed, his breaths ragged. Elena sat beside him, her hands clasping his, her hair damp with melted snow. His lips moved, voice hoarse, words torn from delirium. "Mary!" Elena bowed her head, tears hot on her cheeks. But then his hand tightened, not on memory, but on her. "Elena!" he rasped. His storm-gray eyes opened, unfocused yet fixed on her. Her breath caught. She leaned closer. "I'm here," she whispered. Outside, Storm pawed the snow, his restless energy echoing the fragile heartbeat of the man inside. In the flicker of lamplight, Jace clings to Elena's hand, his fevered voice torn between the memory of his late wife and the woman who just saved his life. For the first time, His heart reaches toward her, but whether in love or confusion, neither of them can yet tell. Spring came late to Wyoming that year. The snow melted slow, reluctant to release its hold on the valley. But when the thaw arrived, it painted the plains with green, cottonwoods heavy with new leaves, wildflowers pushing through the earth as if defying the memory of fire and blizzard. Jace Callahan sat on the porch, his arm still bound in a sling from the storm's fall. Weeks had passed since Elena dragged him back from death's door, yet the moment lived fresh in his mind, her voice whispering promises, her hand holding his as he hovered between this world and the next. The town had changed its tune. Once they branded Elena a deceiver. Now, whispers carried awe. How she braved the storm, how the colt Storm himself had refused to let her go. Pride was not quick to vanish, but even Dry Creek folk could not deny a story that rang like scripture. Still, Jace knew he had his own vow to speak, not to the town, but to the woman who had kept her word to Mary. The day was chosen quietly, no grand gathering, no parade through town. Only a few neighbors came. The preacher, a kindly man named Reverend Hobbs, stooped and silver-haired, his spectacles catching sunlight. He carried a small leather Bible, worn soft with years of use, his voice steady and gentle as if carved from patience itself. Elena stood beneath the great cottonwood that crowned the ranch yard. Its branches spread wide, sheltering the graves of Mary and Daniel. She wore a simple white dress, borrowed from a rancher's wife, its hem brushing her ankles. Her chestnut hair, unpinned, fell loose in the breeze, framing her hazel eyes that brimmed with both fear and hope. Storm circled nearby, his coat gleaming, restless but proud. The colt seemed to sense this moment belonged not to the past, but to a beginning. Jace walked toward her, slower than once he might have, but each step carried the weight of decision. He had traded suspicion for clarity, grief for grace. When he reached her, his storm-gray eyes met hers, and he spoke not as a rancher, but as a man who had finally chosen life again. "Elena Monroe," he said, voice deep and steady. "For too long, I thought I was buried with my past. But you, through fire, through snow, you brought me back. You made me remember what Mary once told me. Love doesn't die with the body. It lives when we choose to give it again." The Reverend opened his book, his words soft as the wind in the cottonwood leaves. "Do you, Jace Callahan, take this woman?" But Jace raised a hand gently. "Before I answer," he said, "I must give her something." From his pocket he drew a small ring, silver worn thin by years. Mary's ring. He held it in his palm, sunlight glinting on the metal. "This was Mary's," he said. "I kept it because I thought letting go would mean losing her. But today, I understand. She asked you to protect me, Elena. And you did. More than I ever deserved. So I give this not as a payment, not as a debt repaid, but as a promise of a new life. With you, Elena's breath caught, her tears falling freely. She took the ring with trembling fingers, her smile fragile but radiant. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Jace Callahan. I'll stand with you, not because Mary asked me, but because I choose to." The Reverend's voice wrapped around them, words of covenant older than memory. The vows were spoken simply, without flourish. And when it was done, Jace and Elena stood as husband and wife, beneath the tree where grief once reigned but hope now rooted. Storm reared, striking the air with his hooves, circling them as if sealing the vow with wild triumph. The colt's cry rang through the valley, echoing across the plains. Neighbors clapped softly, some wiping eyes. Dry Creek would gossip still, but even their tongues could not deny what they had witnessed. The widower and the maid, bound not by scandal, but by promise. As evening fell, Jace and Elena lingered by the cottonwood, hand in hand. The graves lay quiet, the earth softened by new grass. "Mary," Jace murmured, voice thick with memory, "I kept my word to you as best I could. But Elena, she kept it better. Now I'll keep hers." He turned to Elena, eyes storm-gray but no longer clouded. "Sometimes," he said, "we don't rescue them. They rescue us." Elena squeezed his hand, her smile trembling but sure. "And sometimes," she answered, "we don't choose the family we're born into. We choose the one we build." Storm nickered softly, lowering his head as if to bless the moment. Together, they looked out over the wide Wyoming horizon, where light lingered on the edge of dusk. No longer master and servant, no longer widow and orphaned girl, but partners, bound by vow, by love, and by the land that had tested them and finally made them whole. The wind carried their silence into the night, not empty this time, but full. In the ashes of loss and the weight of old promises, Jace and Elena discovered something most of us forget too easily. That love is not about erasing the past, but about carrying it forward with courage. From fire to storm, from suspicion to trust, their journey reminds us that redemption often arrives not in grand gestures, but in the quiet choice to stand by one another, even when the world turns its back. And sometimes, family is not the one we are born into, but the one we have the grace to build. If this story touched your heart, share in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear your voice. And if you'd like to walk with us through more stories of love, resilience, and second chances, please consider subscribing. Your presence here means more than you know.